hustle for me comes from an old baseball coach, right? He said, we're probably like 10 or 12 at this time. He's like, look, you're going to have bad days at the plate. You're going to have bad days in the field, but hustle never slumps. Hustle is this one element of your game that you can control. And so for me, it's this call to control something in your life that you can. You may not always be in control of the economy or a pandemic or, if you get laid off, but like how you spend your time in the, free time, like the discretionary time that you have, that's something that you always have control over. And so I want to encourage people to invest it wisely.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today, we're joined by Nick Loper. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
You bet, guys. I'm all about disrupting the everyday. I like it.
Awesome. All right. Well, the first question that we're going to ask you to kick things off is, who is Nick Loper?
Well, first and foremost, a husband and a father. We've got two energetic boys that are 5 and 3 that occupy a lot of time in a good way. And a lot of the stuff that I get to do today, I feel really fortunate to be able to have the time to spend with them. Outside of that, it took a long time to start self-identifying as a podcaster, but for the last 8.5 years, I've been hosting the Side Hustle Show, deconstructing successful part-time business operations and the marketing strategies behind those. But those are kind of the main things, like a student in the game of business, especially online business, and have been grateful enough to have been doing it for quite a while now.
All right, so let's jump right into the conversation just about side hustles. Now, I guess let's start by talking about what a side hustle is and what a side hustle isn't. So what is your definition of a side hustle?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, a side hustle is anything you're doing to earn money outside of traditional employment, outside of the 9-to-5 job type of thing. But there's a more of an entrepreneurial connotation than just delivering pizzas or being a bartender or something like that. So there's this more entrepreneurial upside here where it's like, well, maybe this is the thing that ultimately has some time leverage, or maybe this is the thing that could be the escape route from the corporate job. Not that that's what everyone wants out of it, but there's something more than just kind of like the moonlighting second job type of thing.
Right. And I think that's how a lot of people define it today is, they, like you said, delivering pizzas or doing Uber Eats or whatever, and that's they call that their side hustle. But yeah, I kind of want to get your insight on that because, again, I wouldn't really call that a side hustle. It's another way to make money to maybe help you support.
When I think of a side hustle, I think of work that somebody does that works for their schedule and is almost beneficial to them, right? So maybe you can do it at home. Maybe you can do it, on the weekends when you don't have your kids. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the last thing that you need is a second job that you hate. So it's got to be something that aligns with the time that you have, the energy that you have, and kind of like the interests and the skills that you have, where that's not to say that there are, it has to be your undying passion, right? But it's something that you at least look forward to, because if you dread doing the work, like that's not a good situation, but something that you at least look forward to and something that you can grow and make progress towards. I think that's the recipe for at least a satisfying use, a more productive use of the free time that you do have.
So who would you say a side hustle is for?
It's really for anybody who is in the position of needing or wanting to make extra cash. And I see people really approach it from both of those sides. The reactive side, like I hate my job, I got to make rent next month, I need to pay down this debt, right? Like, the burdens of I have to do this. And there's other people approaching it from the get to side. Like I get to do this, I want to do this. This is a way to exercise the creative side of my brain that I'm maybe not getting to do at my day job. Maybe I'm the person who's like, I'm okay. Like the day job is just fine, but like, there's gotta be something more. Like maybe there's a way out, maybe there's something else. And it's really interesting given the tools and technology that we have, what people are able to do with the time that they have. So no matter which way you're tackling it from, a lot of I guess it depends on your goals too, like which path you ultimately choose, but lots of different options to choose from depending on which side you're approaching it from.
Yeah. Now, speaking of those options, I guess based on the conversations that you've had and what you've seen, what are some of those common or maybe emerging side hustles that you see people doing?
Oh my gosh. So there's if we step back one layer, right? If the goal is to get out of corporate America, escape the rat race, that kind of thing, ditch the 9 to 5, all of that, motivational language. The three most common ways that we see people do that is, number one, through traditional investments, and this is the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early crowd. Where, if I save 25 times my annual expenses in this nest egg portfolio, then statistically, theoretically, like I'm set for life. I can, withdraw this money and at a rate where it continues to grow and doesn't deplete, hopefully for the next 30, 40, 60 years, however long that you have left. And this is traditional retirement as well. Like it's just accelerating that timeline. Like retirement is a number, a mathematical equation based on your expenses versus an age, a set in stone age. Path number two is rental real estate. I'm going to buy cash flowing properties. I'm going to live off the rent, and I can accelerate that timeline to financial independence that way. And meanwhile, get all these assets paid off by tenants. And so I have this lump sum nest egg down the road too. And then path number three is the entrepreneurial path. This is the sweat equity path in a lot of ways, where like I can will something into existence. I can build something from nothing. And it's kind of speculative upfront in some ways, where it's like I'm putting in this time, effort, energy, and attention where maybe I'm not getting paid for it, or maybe I'm not making a great hourly wage from that up front, with the hope and expectation that, okay, it becomes a little bit more time leveraged. It becomes maybe even a sellable asset down the road, but trying to build up these different income streams. And out of all of them, I found the entrepreneurial path to be the most exciting and the fastest for a lot of ways, but it is, maybe depending on how you approach it, it's seen as more risky. There's certainly ways to dial back that risk and kind of validate some of your ideas up front. Now, under that entrepreneurial umbrella, what we see are, three common business models, and it's selling a product, selling a service, or the more amorphous, like audience-based business, content-based businesses, the blogs, podcasts, YouTubes, TikToks, Instagram, like whatever your content platform of choice is. And what we find is you have a lot more flexibility when you have people paying attention to you. You can sell products, you can sell services, or you can monetize with affiliate relationships, sponsorships, other advertising. So those are kind of the big three. And of those, it's the audience-based business is where I've spent the most time playing, but it's a slower ramp-up period. Whereas, products and services, you get started today. You can flip the stuff that you've got sitting around collecting dust in your garage, in your attic. You could stick your flag in the sand and say, I am now a freelance service provider for whatever skill that I have, whatever problem I can go out and solve. Those are kind of the fastest or more common starting paths for people to get a side hustle going on their own.
And it's interesting, right? Because talking about this topic, I personally love it, because if people know me, they know I am a hustler. And there's been times when I think back. So I started a cleaning business, probably like 3.5 years ago. I gave up my full-time working for children's aid, social services. And then we realized, we want to send our kids to private school. And that was not in the budget because I had just given up my job, 9 to 5. So I had started daycare, but then it was like, what can I do to bring in some extra money? And I'm like, hey, cleaning. I love cleaning. And, you post it on Kijiji, and I was busy all the time. So fast forward now, no longer do I have to clean. So I've really decreased the number of houses I do it for. But then when it turns into that more like, okay, I would like to keep working for maybe savings, for spending, whatever it is, right? So it's nice to see that flip where at some points people may have to start something just because of their situation, COVID, let's say, for example. And then when you do something just because you want to, and you want to benefit your, savings account, right?
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have that flexibility too, to turn it on, turn it off, ramp it up as your desire to do it goes up and down, or your need to do it goes up and down. Whereas for a lot of people, it's just kind of like they haven't learned that entrepreneurial skill set. And it's like, well, what would you do to make extra money? And it's like deer in the headlights. I don't know. But in your case, it's like, I could go find more clients if I needed to, if I wanted to. I think that's a powerful place to be in.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think of COVID, and I'm sure, you worked with a lot of people during this time where, maybe they lost their jobs for X amount of time and they were like, oh, what do I do? Because back in the summer, I was actually going to close it down. And then I thought, you know what, like if COVID has taught us anything, you should almost just always have something going on in your back pocket, especially when you're self-employed, like myself, daycare, right? That just in case, the government says you got to close your home, you still have something, right? So I think that's important as well. And I'm sure you see that working with clients.
Yes, diversity income streams. It's so tough because some people did everything they were supposed to do. They built this business, but it just happened to be in events, or just happened to be in travel, or it happened to be in marketing, but all of their clients happened to be hotels. And it's like, I just felt so bad for these people who are just kind of like, and some are still waiting for the business to bounce back to the level that it was. And some were able to make kind of creative pivots along the way, but definitely diversification being the name of the game there.
Absolutely. Now, you were talking about the audience-based businesses, those content-focused businesses. I guess part of the ramp-up period is obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a big part of it is you have to build that audience in the beginning, right?
That's like the $1 million question. Well, how do I get people to pay attention to me? How do I answer the discovery problem, the awareness problem? I got great stuff to talk about. Nobody knows I exist. For me, it's largely been podcast driven. For other people, it's YouTube. Starting over today, I might lean on the YouTube side of things just because it's got the search and discovery element, I think, where I can create keyword intent content like, titles, description, tags, that kind of thing. But it's also got this like viral wild card that, blogging and podcasting doesn't necessarily have, where he could show up in the suggested search and things like that. The other like audience building platform that I think is really interesting right now is in the email space, whereas the goal for a lot of content creators, especially YouTubers, Instagrammers, TikTokers, when you don't own the platform and, an algorithm change could like wipe you out, is I got to build my email list. I got to get people like onto this, asset that I own, that I have a little more control over. Some people just skip the whole middleman. Like the email is the thing. Like sign up for my newsletter, sign up for my curated resource. And I'm just going to blow your mind every Friday with, my thoughts and ramblings for the week. Some people do incredibly well with this. I think the example that always pops up is like Morning Brew, which was like, the Wall Street Journal for millennials, basically, the Business Digest type of email. It's like they were kind of summarizing content. Like they weren't necessarily creating these news stories themselves, but they were, adding their own, summary and commentary on that stuff. It's like, could you do the same thing in your niche, whether it be parenting or gardening or golf or whatever you're into? Could you do the same thing? Because for what, like as a consumer, as a recipient of those newsletters, that's super valuable. Like you just cut through all the clutter. You said, these are the 3 best articles that I found on whatever topic it is this week. That's super helpful for me. And secondly, it becomes a part of my, weekly routine. I start to, look forward to that, or even a daily routine, depending on the volume of content that's being produced in that niche. I think that's a cool place to play. And then like other audience business models down the road, as the audience grows, monetize with sponsorships, affiliates, your own products, your own services, lots of different ways that you can go there.
Awesome. Now, I'm curious to know as well, because you've been in the side hustle game for a long time. You've been successful, but I think a lot of times when we see success, what people miss are the failures. And I'm curious, do you have a favorite failure that you encountered along the way? And really just to set the context for that, is there anything that sticks out as something that didn't go well for you, but when you look back on it now, you're glad that it happened?
Oh my gosh, there's lots of things. On my first day of self-employment, my first day of I called it my retirement, with my original side hustle, which was totally unrelated. This was like a comparison shopping site for footwear back in the day. Pull in the catalogs from Zappos, Amazon, like all these other footwear retailers, tell you where you can find the best price. On my first day of self-employment, Google comes down and says, you know what? You can no longer advertise with us. Your site no longer meets our quality standards, quality guidelines. Like you couldn't have said anything like the last 2 years. Like I just turned in the keys to the company car. I just quit my job counting on this traffic and revenue that you never had a problem with before. And it was I mean, it was 80% of the traffic and revenue like gone in an instant. And, it was 3 months of, trying to rework the landing pages and investing into development costs, where now not only do you not have revenue coming in, but you got to expend more capital, like trying to improve the website. And ultimately they come back and said, we made an error. You're good to go. And it was, it was back on, it was back in business. But it's like, it's just great, go through the 7 stages of anger and denial and all these things. But it was an important lesson on diversification, on, building user experience, on what these big tech platforms really want for their users. And in most cases, it's for people to keep using their product. Like, what does Facebook want? They want people to spend more time on Facebook. What does Google want? They want what any dominant player wants. They want to keep dominating, So it's like, well, how do we do that? By providing the best search results. And in their mind, like the site, even though had plenty of happy customers, was not quite what they were looking for. So with some tweaks, was able to get back in their good graces. I mean, I've had, projects where it's, $10,000 in development costs that just went up in smoke that people, couldn't deliver. And that was, might be my bad for not cutting them off earlier as they're not meeting milestones. And you just kind of string along. I'm trying to think of other, dozens of projects, like just some dark, quiet death in a corner of the internet. Like, I started a wine related site. I have no interest in wine other than I drink it occasionally. Like, I had no business creating the site. It was like purely like, come here, click on my affiliate links type of thing. Like, had no reason to exist, right? So if you are starting to create content, like, you got to answer that question first. Like, what is the reason that your site exists? Like, what's in it for the user? Like, what, with them, or what's in it for me, or something, as the acronym to remember. But I started this wine site, and in the research for this is why, like, choosing what's next is more important than choosing what's forever. Like, getting started is better than, sitting on the sidelines, even if something doesn't work out. Because in the research for that site, I came across this like website that was reviewing different wine clubs, and they had like this user generated content, which was, looking back, was probably fake. Like, they were probably like gaming the rankings to show whoever paid them the most affiliate commission would like show up on top. But I was like, this is kind of a cool concept. Like, what could I pivot that to? Like, what other thing could I create, review content, like profile content, who, what, when, where, why type of stuff, and then open it up to user reviews for, which led to one of my longest running side hustles. It was a site called virtualassistant.com, which I just sold about a year ago. And it was a directory and review platform for outsourcing companies for virtual assistant services. And it started as a result of this failed project. Never would have, come up with this idea, come up with this concept, had I not been dabbling in other projects that sadly did not work out.
Have all of your side hustles been based online?
Mostly. Like, the project that kind of bit me with the entrepreneurial bug was a house painting, like traditional exterior house painting business in college, which was run through a company called College Works Painting. There's a handful of these, that target, naive and optimistic college students and say, you want to make some money this summer here? Well, we've got a deal for you. But that was really my first taste of working for profits and not wages. But since then, most of the stuff has been online, whether e-commerce, whether it be freelancing, whether it be online courses, or whether it be kind of these affiliate or content-driven sites.
Okay. So, question for you. For people who are looking into starting something, but their number one, I guess you could say, reason as to why they haven't is time. How do you make time for a side hustle?
This is definitely one of the most common objections or excuses that come up. I don't have the time. And I'm with you. Depending on what season you're in your life, it may not be time. Like, we were at the park with some friends of ours this weekend. They have twin 1.5-year-olds. It's like, this is not on their radar right now. Like, this is just, it's not that season of their life. And that's totally fine. If you're in a season where you think you might have a little more time, what I would recommend is doing kind of a informal time audit on your, I forget the math, but 148 hours per week, or whatever 7 times 24 is, however many hours in the week, and figuring out, like, where do those hours actually go? What are you spending that time on? And I have just used Excel for this in the past, but you can, like, there's A Time Logger is an app that'll do this. Toggle, Toggl, is a web app that'll do this. I'm trying to figure out, okay, where's the time actually going? Because I think once you write that down and you start to get a little bit more honest with yourself, you might find like, okay, if I got serious about this, there is a little bit more time. If I got intentional with this. And I'm just as guilty as this as everybody else in saying, well, I didn't have time. What I've tried to force myself to do is reframe that as the slightly more honest but more brutal saying, well, I prioritized something else. My wife doesn't always like to hear that, but it's like, why didn't you do that? Well, I didn't have time. The truth is, I prioritized something else. And I think if we start thinking in those terms, then we start to say, okay, if I really wanted to make this a priority, I could. And maybe it's carving out 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, half an hour there, and just chipping away at it. And I'm, again, guilty of this too, like not making progress on projects because it seems really daunting. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to have this uninterrupted 36-hour block of time to really crank this out. And so trying to break things down into their like smallest actionable steps so I can kind of chip away at that in the little gaps in the day that I may have, 15 minutes here, half an hour there. And I feel like I can build some positive momentum in that way. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld has this thing like, don't break the chain, which is like, I'm going to write a joke every day. And you start to see the compound effect of that, even if it's just one, like, just trying to build that daily habit to keep the momentum alive.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I've heard that, not necessarily that analogy, but that example where Jerry Seinfeld did say that he started just writing one joke a day. And yeah, he's been in the game for a lot of years. So I can only imagine what his content is like right now, even the stuff that he's never shared with anybody.
Right. And it's not all going to be good, but it's like it's part of the practice. Right. And, I think in the same way of the Side Hustle show, like the first 50 episodes, like, probably kind of painful to listen back to, but you almost got to get in your reps in a way. The first 50 blog posts, you get comfortable with WordPress, you get comfortable with writing for the internet, you learn a little bit of SEO along the way, how to structure things. There's just a matter, I don't know, it's probably hard to shortcut that.
Now, with all the people that you've spoken to and all the different side hustles that you've heard about, were there any two that, when you first heard the concept, you thought, how did this work? Like, are there any that really just kind of surprised you or just stuck out as kind of odd?
Yeah, there's a ton. One of my favorites from the last year was a high school history teacher in New York, Steve Nadramia, whose side hustle was renting out portable hot tubs. And I have, I'm from the mindset of like, okay, I want rental income. I'm going to buy, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a decent neighborhood. And if I can cash flow, or if I can charge, 1% of my purchase price, the 1% rule in terms of monthly rent, like, okay, that pencils out to be a decent return on investment from like a real estate perspective. But here he's saying it's like, well, you can buy these hot tubs used for like $2 or $3 grand and rent them out for $200 for every week or $500 a month. He's got different pricing. And I was like, oh, okay, that pencils out to be a much faster return on investment than some of these other methods. And so when we spoke, he had he called it his fleet of like 25 of these things that were like booked out. He started out trying to replace like his summer job that he had kept as a teacher for a lot of years. And was like, oh, this is a little more time leveraged in a way. You still got to deliver them, set them up, and deal with liability insurance and that kind of thing. But it was like, once that thing is out the door, it's, paying for itself, and then it reaches break even and beyond. That was a really interesting one. Some of the other ones that come to mind are in the like home services space. So you mentioned your home cleaning business. I think this is an area where the pie continues to get bigger as more and more homeowners like outsource this type of stuff. I don't want to deal with this in my spare time. Like I'm busy. That's just not how I want to. It's not something I want to deal with. Gutter cleaning, pressure washing, lawn care, like all of these things. I feel like the pie just keeps getting bigger. And so as a new entry into the space, it's not necessarily about, conquesting market share from existing service providers. It's just like, more and more people are coming into the space as customers. Like I talked to somebody who had a mobile detailing business. Like, we'll come to your place, we'll clean out your car. And the soundbite that stood out from him was like, for most of my customers, it's their first time ever getting their car detailed. And to me, that was a signal of a growing market. And so I thought that was kind of cool. We talked to a gal in in Michigan who had a pet waste removal business, like a pooper scooper business. It's just like not really glamorous work, but recurring, predictable weekly revenue. Like as long as that homeowner has that dog and they grow accustomed to you coming up and dealing with it, like, they're likely to keep paying that recurring charge. So I thought that was an interesting one. And then, so there's this Warren Buffett line that says, if you don't figure out a way to make money in your sleep, you're going to work until you die. And it kind of hits you. You're like, well, yeah, I would prefer not to do that if that's an option. And so the call is to kind of, carve out a portion of your week to grow that time leveraged or quote, passive income piece of your revenue pie, of your income pie. And one cool example that I found of somebody doing that was Matt Boknock, who was a mechanical engineer working in Chicago. And his side hustle was fixing motorcycles, like turning wrenches in the garage, hours for dollars, service-based business, add on Craigslist, like our Kijiji. Like don't take it to the dealer, don't pay dealership rates, bring it to me, I know what I'm doing. And what Matt did that was really cool was set up the camera in the corner of the garage to film himself doing the repairs. And so nobody's paying him to do this. It was kind of like speculative extra work up front, but now he's got content for YouTube. So he starts making YouTube ad money. He starts making affiliate revenue. Oh, these are the tools that I'm using. Click my affiliate link. He starts getting noticed from sponsors. Like I think it was Allstate or somebody was, discovered his channel. It's like, would you make us some videos? We're trying to break into the motorcycle market. Like, okay. He starts selling these full engine rebuild videos. Like, again, maybe you're not local to me. Maybe I can't do this job for you, but here, buy my step-by-step guide to do it yourself for $30 or something. And so over time, he took this business from being, almost 100% active income to now being almost 100% passive income or time leveraged income. And I thought that was a really interesting example of like, okay, if I don't proactively do something about this equation and this income imbalance, then it's never going to change. And so it was something that, of course, was not guaranteed to work out, but ended up doing pretty well for him.
Going back to the pooping, scooping business, our kids, the 3 older ones, but mostly the 2, they did that 2 springs ago, like right before COVID
right
started.
Before the pandemic,
actually, they made so much money.
Right. It's like spring, it's like spring clean out, right? Like,
oh yeah,
snow
like
belts and stuff.
Exactly. And I said, after it started getting warmer, I'm like, guys, I don't know if you want to do this anymore. When it was still cold and you couldn't really benefit from all the smells and stuff, it wasn't so bad, but they made so much money. And then we had to start telling people, no, we can't get there because we were driving them, right?
Oh yeah.
And there was a guy that we knew, and he's like, you know what? Pass any numbers over to me because I'm off right now due to COVID.
Okay.
And this guy, he's still doing it now, and he's still making a ton of money. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like I think you will get inspiration just from like paying attention to the signs that are on the side of work trucks, work vans in your neighborhood. I mean, we saw, just plumbing companies, gutter cleaners, window washers, lawn care stuff, HVAC type of company, some of them are more technical than others, but you find you get kind of inspiration from other people who are operating in your area.
For sure. So you talk about the dark side of hustling. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, I think there's been some hustle backlash, hustle culture that like, glorifies this, rise and grind, hustle 24/7 kind of stuff. And I agree with that 100%. Like if you burn yourself out, you're just not going to be in a good place. Mm-hmm. There's maybe a time and a place for what I'll call like a sprint period. And we've had guests kind of mention this as well, where like, I feel like if I can just hold my breath and get through this, month, 2 months of like, I know it's going to suck, but I'm going to come out stronger on the other side. And if you see like, if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, okay. But if you're setting yourself up for like 3 to 5 years of just like this grind, I think your relationships are going to suffer. Your health is going to suffer. It may not be worth it. So take that with some caution. So hustle for me comes from an old baseball coach, right? He said, we're probably like 10 or 12 at this time. He's like, look, you're going to have bad days at the plate. You're going to have bad days in the field, but hustle never slumps. Hustle is this one element of your game that you can control. And so for me, it's this call to control something in your life that you can. You may not always be in control of the economy or a pandemic, or, if you get laid off, but like how you spend your time in the, free time, like the discretionary time that you have, that's something that you always have control over. And so I want to encourage people to invest it wisely.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, the other thing too, you talk about that discretionary time, and you did allude to this earlier, doing a time audit of those, those 168 hours that we have in a week. And the only reason I know that number offhand was just my old role. We called our contracts where we had a person working, we had one person on 24/7. It was, we just called it 168. So that's the only reason I know that number.
Okay.
I didn't do the math, but in terms of those, just making that time, what are some insights that you can share with people, just in ways that we can make time? I guess obviously we start with that audit of our time, and then what do you think? Do we chip away at some of those things that aren't important, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I mean, I found that we were cutting, TV is a huge culprit, social media is a huge culprit. So I found the news feed eradicator has been really helpful for me on Facebook for desktop. I don't have a great solution for it on mobile yet, but because I still use Facebook for work. But at least on desktop, this stops the infinite scroll, like what's going on in this world. I use a tool called SaneBox just for email filtering. I've got a bunch of other email filters set up just to kind of allow batch processing in a way where, affiliate notifications go here, autoresponder responses go over here, newsletters go over here, just kind of routing that stuff to be able to process it, at least in my mind, more efficiently. Thanks to COVID, we don't have a commute anymore, really. So I think a lot of people have grown accustomed to that. Well, I don't have to spend an hour in the car, both ways anymore. So I think that's been positive in a lot of ways. I'm trying to think of other time-saving hacks, of course, like, batch meal prep, that kind of thing. My friend was like, if you don't have leftovers, you're doing it wrong. Was his line. So I thought that was pretty good. It's just, I don't know. I probably still work more than I should. It's probably not the best person to talk to about this. But if you find something that you like, that's kind of the thing. And then we can, go down the path of systemizing and outsourcing what you can, automating what you can. It's the Tim Ferriss thing, eliminate, automate, delegate kind of a thing. And so that's kind of the framework that I have attempted to use and still am attempting to build out, the process documentation, process libraries for stuff that can't necessarily be automated, but doesn't have to be you doing it. Could you find somebody on your team to help take that off your plate?
Awesome. Now, the other thing kind of time management related that I'd like to ask you is just for any, again, maybe some other hacks here, but for someone, and it doesn't seem like you disliked what you were doing before you made your side hustle your main thing, but when you're still in that phase where you have your 9 to 5 and you're trying to build something, what are some things that we can do to make sure that we have time for everything?
For me, it was kind of this, and at this time it was, this unspoken calendar time block. And so if it was today, we're trying to be more formal, like, in my case, go to work, get home, go to the gym, do the dinner thing, clean up. And, kind of from 7 to 10 for probably a good year or two was side hustle time, which that was like, in a long distance relationship, that was like pre-kids. And so it's like, it was a different stage of life. And so I was able to do that. I would be on the road for work a lot of times. And so it was similar, like kind of by myself in the hotel room. So, separate laptop, right? Separation of church and state in some ways. Like I don't want, anything on the work laptop to be, side business related. So, finish up my emails from there, then fire up the side hustle, personal laptop. But it was kind of this dedicated practice of getting that done. And with very few exceptions. Like, I wasn't the person like, logging in, like, and it was an online thing. So I didn't have to, return phone calls like on my lunch break, stuff like that. But if you are that person, you might have to play the time zone arbitrage thing. Well, I was like, I could, after hours, I could deal with clients on the West Coast or vice versa and kind of play in that space. It's just, you kind of make time, you vote your priorities with your time. And it was something that was important to me. And so it made it a consistent habit.
Awesome. Now, again, you've been doing this for a lot of years. If you could go into a time machine and visit Nick when, you know, you did that retirement, you started you're launching your first side hustle. What advice would you give to Nick then, knowing what you know now?
Knowing what I know now would be, try and scale faster, like get while the getting is good while you can. Because I was the person who naively thought like, this could be my thing. Like I could be the guy who sells shoes on the internet and that'll be it. But like a lot of businesses, they kind of had this finite lifespan. Mm-hmm. So I think there was a way to delegate earlier and scale the business faster, smarter, while still being lean and responsible. We've seen companies, go big fast, and then, an algorithm changes, or, some element of their business changes. And then now they're forced with like layoffs and the responsibility of other people kind of relying on you for income. And that's like a stressful place to be in too. But definitely in that business, like if you found something that works, lean into that. And that was something that I didn't necessarily appreciate the urgency of at that stage.
Now, Nick, is there anything that you're working on the next few months that we can look forward to, and where can we find you?
I never have a good answer for that. Project wise, so I just put out a book called 1K 100 Ways at 1K100ways.com. If you are on the side hustle sidelines, that book is a great resource it's just a bunch of case studies from the side hustle community, what people are working on, how they got their first customers and traction, what mistakes they made along the way, kind of told in parallel, where everybody has answered the same set of questions. Another resource that's free, that's constantly updated, is sidehustlenation.com/ideas, to hopefully get the creative juices flowing and say what kind of options are out there. And of course, we'd love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show as well.
Everything's linked in the description, so be sure to check out everything that Nick's doing. Nick, thank you so much for the time today. We greatly appreciate it, and just enjoyed the conversation and the insights.
Mm-hmm.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.